We have so much to talk about this morning, this week with our roundtable, so let's get right to it.
First, an all-star group today, so some introductions first. Rosemary O'Hara is the editorial page editor of the SunSentinel. Chris Smith is an attorney in Fort Lauderdale and a former state senator from Broward. Marili Cancio is an attorney in Miami and an important voice in the Florida Republican Party. This week, she was appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis to the newly created Greater Miami Expressway Agency. The toll woman, or anti-toll woman now.
That's it.
Oh, we need to talk.
yeah, we all need to talk.
All right, so good morning, or good afternoon by this point. I'm glad you're all here. Rosemary, let me begin by asking you here, BSO lost its state accreditation this week. It really won't change the way services are delivered by the BSO deputies or the fire department, but it is the latest in a string of black eyes that this department has gotten.
Yes, it is. It casts a cloud over the agency, and that's unfortunate. It does, though, when you have a system of an elected county sheriff cast a political card on the table. The decertification seemed to be aimed at former Sheriff Israel,
right,
and perhaps politically calculated to help Sheriff Tony, because if he then is able to get the agency reaccredited in a few months, he will get the credit for that. It also could help the governor's case in the Senate that he was justified in suspending Sheriff Israel for the airport and the Parkland shootings.
Right.
You know what's confusing is, as Scott Israel had mentioned, and I have the documents, he is telling the truth, that there were 2 on-site assessments that this agency gave glowing reports prior to delisting. That's confusing.
And to the point that I saw, so I heard about this decertification a week before it was even announced. And so when I heard about it, I started researching it a little bit. And then when it became public was the day he filed for re-election.
Right.
So that kind of, put my...
Actually, it bubbled to the surface over the weekend. We all started hearing about it over the weekend, and as
But it
news
was done
works,
the
no
week
one wanted
before.
to. Yes, it was done the week before. No one could report it without any kind of confirmation.
Right.
So it was done the week before.
But I think we all have to agree that the sheriff's office has problems. They had training problems, equipment problems, communication problems, and they even withdrew from seeking national certification in January. So it shows that they probably felt that they were not prepared. I mean, Sheriff Tony also is going to have tremendous challenges. In the last 6 months, we've seen a lot of negative news even during his leadership.
Yeah.
So I think that they need to regroup.
There
Well,
are
I
other
think-
certifications, though, right?
But they are, I think, under Sheriff Tony, they are regrouping. Chris, let me ask you, this week, 2 of the deputies who were seen on that viral video, cell phone video, showing a 15-year-old DeLuca Roll being pepper sprayed, taken to the ground, punched in the head. They were charged by Mike Satz, the Broward State Attorney, this week with battery and also falsifying a police report, lying on the police report. And a 3rd deputy who was on the scene, who had written sort of an account supporting them, he was charged as well. What does that tell you?
That was a tremendous step forward for Mike Satz and the Broward State's attorney to go ahead and file those charges. We were a little disappointed that they're misdemeanor charges. All those, even that battery is a misdemeanor battery. And when you look at how violently and gratuitously this kid's face was pushed into the ground, to be charged with a misdemeanor battery, even if you plead it down later, but the original charge being a misdemeanor was a little disheartening. But I'm going to thank and be glad that for once in Broward that these officers were charged, and it will send a signal throughout the law enforcement community that maybe we need to rethink these type of situations when it comes to kids in Broward County.
You know, they are the latest in a recent string of officers in both Broward and Dade being criminally charged for use of force. But Rosemary, use of force charges, that's a whole subject. But lying goes to character.
Right.
That is a troubling charge for a police officer. The cover-up is worse than the crime kind of charge.
Right. And it goes to show why body cameras are so helpful, both to protect an officer who's wrongly accused and to protect the public who may be wrongly abused. As in there, I mean, another charges filed this week were against the officer who just punched in the face that guy who was handcuffed to a hospital bed. You know, and going back to Sheriff Israel, I would say that part of the politics of this state accreditation board is Sheriff Israel was an outlier in the sheriff's group. He stood against open carry, campus carry, for body cameras, against assault weapons, and for a number of people, and that went against the standings of the state sheriff's group. So he was an outlier in that group. So I'm not standing up for him. I'm just saying that there's politics going on here that we need to recognize.
You know, Miami-Dade County is the only county right now that does not elect a sheriff. That's about to change now.
It's going to change.
Yeah.
It's going to change.
Does that, I believe it was Rosemary who mentioned politics in law enforcement poses some troubling issues.
I agree. I agree. I mean, I wish that all those positions were nonpartisan, non-political.
Yeah, well, we should point out to anybody who isn't aware, maybe you better than I, but the Constitutional Revision Commission put that on the ballot. One of the changes was that you had to elect a county sheriff. Miami-Dade County hasn't had an elected sheriff since, I don't know, 1948, when there was corruption and it was just a terrible police department. Since that time, the Miami-Dade County Sheriff, police chief, has reported to the mayor, and it's worked just fine. But now, 2022.
I know this was coming.
Not only that, but also an elections chair who is going to be up for.
Yeah.
Property appraiser.
And
Come on,
property
when you talk
appraiser.
law enforcement, now let's just look at Miami-Dade County. We had an officer this week not getting any jail time for shooting at an autistic guy holding a train and missing that autistic guy and hitting the guy next to him and getting no jail
caregiver.
time. I mean, so let's not think that just because it's an appointed down there. I mean, there's always problems in law enforcement.
Well, that's a judge and jury issue.
Right.
The sentencing. I mean,
Yeah.
the conviction was there. That was the sentencing. And I mean, while we're on this, can I just go rogue for a little bit? The judge in this case not only issued no jail time as part of the sentence, but also is making
Write an
Officer
essay.
Aleda write an essay, 2,500 words essay. to
Stand
which-
at the board and write, I
So-
will not shoot, a caregiver
Is that going
line
to be
on the
graded?
street.
I got
Is
my
this-
12-year-old now like, Dad,
Is this appropriate?
can I write essays from now on?
If we're going to go rogue, remember the judge that didn't want to sentence the kid for rape because he was a good boy from a good family going to a good
Yeah.
college?
Oh, that's a whole other
yeah,
subject.
that's it.
Yeah, that is a whole other subject. But that, I mean, is that an appropriate for Jonathan Aleda? That was a case where he said he wasn't aiming properly. So you either missed or you had a use of force issue.
But even if you were
Neither of
aiming
that was
properly,
good.
you were shooting at an autistic kid holding a train
Yeah.
when there were other officers there.
So what's your take
You're
on
the
that? What-
only one that shot.
happened
You're
there?
the only one that shot. There are other officers there, so that shows me that there's a problem with this officer, that he was the only one to actually shoot. And so now, with him not serving jail time and stuff, I don't know if he keeps his accreditation
was found-
or can serve as a
He
as
was
an officer
found guilty
somewhere
of
else.
culpable negligence. It's not as if the jury, they found against him.
But can he
on
serve
one
as an
charge.
officer somewhere? Can he go to another department or something?
I don't know the answer
That's a
to that.
good question.
Good
I mean,
question.
because I got concerns.
Let's
with that.
ask our
Find that out. I know someone's going
crack
to tweet us the
producer
answer.
to check that when we come back with more Roundtable. Stay with us in just a minute. Welcome back. We are in the midst of an excellent roundtable with Marili Cancio, Chris Smith, and Rosemary O'Hara. Rosemary, you were saying during the break that you had seen some early polling, even though this far out, who knows what it means. But Scott Israel is the favorite up there to be reelected?
Yes. I actually haven't seen it, but I've heard about it. And I've been told that the polling shows that Scott Israel is the front runner in the Broward Sheriff's race, that it is his race to lose, that for a lot of people, they see his suspension as Trump's favorite governor, having suspended Sheriff Israel for going on television and standing up to the NRA.
So for some context, whose polling is that? Do you know the background of the poll?
No, I don't. I don't.
All right. Well, we will look, but that's fascinating. I mean, Broward County is the most Democratic county in the state, and Gregory Tony, the very nice and I like the guy, the new sheriff, used to be a Republican. He changed his registration to Democrat shortly after he took office.
Well, and you
A
got
couple days before he
Yeah,
took
you got a Democratic county that's had a sheriff appointed by a Republican governor, and so sometimes the voters just want, hey, it's our decision to make, not Tallahassee's
Well,
decision.
Gregory Tony is the public servant in place. He is now a Democrat, has said he is going to be running in the primary against Scott Israel and a couple of more people. So, Scott Israel has name recognition, no doubt. Is it too early to place your faith in a poll like that?
Well, absolutely, it's too early.
Yeah.
And let's hope that
What a shocking answer.
Marili, let's pivot a little bit here. I want you to comment on the fact that late this week, President Trump said that he still wants to get the citizenship question on the census, even though the census questionnaire is being printed without it. The Supreme Court said in response to the request to put it on the questionnaire that the reasons given by the Commerce Department were contrived. Now, what's the president doing here?
Well, that question was on the census ballot for many, many decades. So it's not something that is the first time that it would be in there.
It's been 70 years since it's been on a
Well,
census, but
Well, no, they had it in the long format until like maybe 20 years ago. So I think that we need to know, like, how many people do we have here illegally? We talk about 11 million, 14 million. I mean, I would like to know. It would help them. It would help our immigration
The
debate.
difference now is, as compared to 20 years ago, we now have a public debate of we're going to start going and grabbing people and deporting them. So now there's a heightened sense of awareness about it as compared to 20 years ago. Well, I mean,
No, we're actually going to enforce the laws, and the people that are about to be deported, the people that already went through the system, about 2 million people that already went through our court systems that have found that they already had their due process, they in court, and now it's time to leave. Because what we're seeing right now with the immigration crisis, that what we're seeing in the southern border, it's a real crisis in our country, and something
I
that
don't think any reasonable person would dispute that there is a crisis. Rosemary, I've got to say I'm certainly no expert on the Constitution or the census, but as I understand it, it simply says every 10 years you will count everybody in this country. It doesn't say citizens, non-citizens, and we know for a fact that a lot of people who even have green cards or who became citizens or live here legally are frightened to put their status down or talk to a census taker.
Right. It says persons. It doesn't say citizens. We were going to count the number of persons. And Chief Justice Roberts sided with the more liberal majority or minority of the Supreme Court in saying that the president's arguments for putting the question on the census didn't hold water. And that the basis really stemmed from this political calculation that putting that question will keep mostly Hispanics who are not citizens from being counted, and that will largely affect Democratic districts.
The census is to count the number of people in return for providing representation in Congress.
That's part of it.
And services and funding.
Yes.
So wouldn't South Florida, of all places, really lose out if those numbers
Yeah.
are
And that's
right?
why I say it's not just Democratic districts, it's the state of Florida as a whole. I mean, when you talk about the number of people that we have here in South Florida and in Central Florida and in the Tampa area, I mean, to lose counts on those, we'll lose federal dollars coming down to the
Huge
state.
amounts of money.
We'll lose apportionment in the U.S. Congress.
But the narrative is that we're going to lose numbers because people are not going to want to answer. The census already has questions and saying who's your partner, who do you live with, what's your date of birth. So it already includes a lot of very questions that you would say, well, maybe they don't want to answer these
But the
questions.
citizenship question, I think, is different, of different kind. You know, before we run out of time, I do want to just give a chance to play a little bit of the soundbite of the president on July 4th. He gave generally a kind of a pro-military, praising the military speech at the Lincoln Memorial. Good for that. You know, nobody could really object too strongly. But there was one part of his speech that just was sort of off the rails. Here it is.
In June of 1775, the Continental Congress created a unified army out of the revolutionary forces. It ran the ramparts. It took over the airports.
Which airports were those? You know, he said the teleprompter broke down, which is why he said it. But as somebody who has lived with teleprompter for many years, you know, when the teleprompter breaks down and I say something, you know, in error, I would like to think that I maybe stop and say, "Oh, wait a minute, that's not right." You know, I'm going to correct my.
For the first time, the president did say that he was wrong, which I was shocked. He was like, teleprompter went off, and yeah, I was wrong on
But
this.
he said he knew the speech cold. He,
Yeah,
you know,
well,
he
I
didn't
mean, he's
need
Trump.
the
He's gonna
teleprompter.
And
say
all
it
the,
different ways.
the criticisms we've heard in the past for politicians using teleprompters, you know, and then when President Trump's teleprompter goes down, he makes what these memes, the battle of baggage claim.
I think that you can pick on that mistake that he made, but I think the salute to America was, he made unifying remarks, he honored the military.
him, yeah.
I think it was a beautiful day, a great patriotic day to celebrate America.
I still have to say, to see tanks on the mall in front of the Lincoln Memorial, it just doesn't sit well with me.
The bar is so low because he didn't go political. You know, we have to applaud or whatever. Come on,
I
every
think
president should
it's
do
all
that.
good that we can all laugh at ourselves every once in a while.
Yeah, I've
and-
never made any
and everybody
gaps.
else.
I mean,
All right.
I don't know about
Thank you all for coming in. Rosemary, actually a little under the weather. Thanks for being a trooper and showing up.
Thanks all. We'll be back with a check of the Sunday forecast. Do not go away.